Alright, doing things a little backwards here. So I'm a little further along over here, so don't pay attention over here, pay attention to here. This is just an intro to part 5 of my video series on setting up a Thorens TD-160 Mark I turntable, an early version. This one we're going to go over basically changing out the arm from the bent arm that you saw at the end of the last video. This part was bent. You can see the new ones are already on, so I'm giving everything away here. Balancing the springs on the turntable, that's why it's all elevated. And it's a very long video, but use the slider, fast forward if it's too long and too boring. You can jump through sections that way. I just didn't want to leave anything out. If it's too long, I might even have to parse it out into another part or something like that. So I haven't done editing yet on it, so I might be able to shave some time off of it and everything without losing any content. What else did I do? So yeah, we disassembled the arm, pulled the arm out. We relubricated, flipped it over upside down. We had to rewire the arm, and then you'll see all of that in this video coming up. And very interesting for those that want to learn how to balance things. I will say that the very end of this, where I go through the balancing portion of the springs, my camera kept cutting off and I had to try to regroup, and I wasn't sure how much I lost, so it'll be a bit disjointed. But if you watch the whole thing, you'll sort of get the idea of what I was trying to get across. It just didn't come across sequentially quite the way I wanted it, but I didn't want to spend more time re-recording it. It takes longer to actually do these videos than to actually sit down and do the turntable. I would have been done by now, but I wanted to share some of this with you folks. And certainly anything that I do is not the absolute correct way. It's the way I do it. I've done a lot of reading and had a bit of experience with these tables, but there are certainly more experts, people that are more expert than I, even though I've worked on quite a few of these now. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, and hopefully you enjoy this video and you learn some things. I actually learned some new tricks on how to feed the wires through the tube. Setting up the bearings. I'm going to save the bearing portion to the very end. I keep talking about it, you'll find out. But I ran out of time, so I think I'm going to do a part 6 and just set the bearing up. I think it's pretty well set up well anyway, but I'll go through the motions and show how it's done anyway. So with that, hopefully you enjoy this part of the video series on the 160. Well, here we are, back to the Thorens TD-160. I did an Akamichi system in between just because I was waiting for this to come in. So this is the Thorens TD, my second Thorens TD-160 that I acquired, and we've gone through a number of things, and the next thing that I said I would cover would be replacing the arm tube, which I got in the mail from Switzerland. So this is new old stock. I thought it was very reasonably priced. So this just came in the mail yesterday, and it comes from shopper.ch. That's spelled SCHOPPER.ch. You may recognize them as a company that makes alternative head shells for these. Good head shells. I don't think they're any better or any worse than these ones, or even the 3D ones that I build. So, but they're a quite well-known Swiss company. They bought up a whole bunch of new old stock from the old Thorens company, so they have a limited stock of items there. I think they're pretty much out of motors, but even then they were selling them for like 350 or 400 bucks, and then you had to ship them back to North America. So they weren't very cheap. So this one is I think they said there was still like a dozen left or 8 left or something like that. These are the arm tubes for the TP16 arm. And as you recall in my earlier parts, when I started setting up this turntable, I noticed that this head shell had a distinct downward cant, and when I looked at it more closely, you could actually see that this connector piece here, I don't know, somebody may have, you know, torqued on the head shell a bit. The other head shell was quite corroded and everything, so I have a couple of them, or 3 or 4 of them, kicking around that I had acquired through friends who were Thorens reps and stuff like that way back in the day. One guy actually sent me 3 from Brazil, nice fella that I knew as he was the Sony rep, but he also had a mitt full of Thorens turntables. So I put a really nice one on this this turntable, because this turntable is probably going to remain mine. Yeah, so it has that downward cant. So what we're going to do is replace this. In a previous video, and in this, I'm posting this in an Audio Karma thread on rebuilding this turntable. One of the I actually did this before in my previous Thorens TD-160, which is upstairs in my main system. And for that one, what I really wanted to do was to strip down the entire arm, but then I got kind of cold feet. I didn't want to wreck anything, so I just ended up, so what I ended up doing is pulling the whole arm assembly, including the baseboard, and yeah, overkill for just changing an arm. I got a lot of flack for that, but people didn't know that in my mind's eye, I just, for interest's sake, wanted to strip down the entire arm and put it back together again and clean all the parts and pieces and everything. But you know, I came to a point where I wasn't too sure on some things, and I didn't want to wreck it or break anything, so so I just went ahead and changed the arm tube after I removed the arm. So instead of taking out this baseboard, taking apart the queuing assembly down below, there's an easier way that people pointed out, which is you can actually just do the VTA, 2 VTA screws that hold it up and down. You can actually slide the whole arm assembly out without having to take this whole thing apart. We'll probably take the queue up rest here off. It's just basically a hex key right here to pop that off. We'll remove the arm, decouple it from underneath. I'll have to flip the turntable over. That's why I've got these cans here with they're my son's Bud Light Mango, and I can't stand Budweiser beer, so this is a good use for it. Nice and sturdy, and we'll have 3 of them basically to hold up the turntable when I have it flipped upside down. Of course, we'll remove the inner platter, the belt. As you can see on the previous part, I put in a 3D printed protection post for the motor, and yeah, so we'll jump into this. This was kind of raised. The suspension is all a little bit wonky. That's the last thing I'm going to do. Same idea. I'll have the turntable propped up like this, and then I can get underneath with the springs and then adjust the springs. I've got a TD-165 video where I show how that's done. But we showed you how I cleaned the springs and all that stuff on this. But we'll at near the end we'll show you how we're going to actually tune the suspension. As it is, it rides really close to that protection post, and so we need to stiffen it up a little bit more to have the platter ride a little bit higher, so it's not going to pound down on the protection post. Yeah, so that's where we're at. Yeah, the bottom side of this, I put on the old bottom plate. The previous part, you saw me making a new bottom plate. That won't come on until the end. I've still got to paint it and everything, but we'll pop that on with the new feet, and we're getting close. So there's a procedure here for once I take the arm apart, decouple it from the coupling block to the RCA jacks. What we'll do is reassemble. You have to basically unscrew all the bearings. There's 3 bearings in this arm. We'll have to open them up in order to pull the arm tube out, and then get the wires back down through the center of the base going into the arm mount, and reconnect that up. And then there's a procedure here that I have acquired down the line. It's called Tonearm bearing adjustment on the Thorens TP-16 Tonearms, and that's what I used on my previous one, and that turntable is working spectacularly. So if anybody ever wants this, they can just email me or just PM me and give me an email address to send it to, and I can send it to you instead of having to search all over the internet for it. Okay, we're going to jump into this. What I'm going to do after I take the inner platter off, I'm going to have to, I oiled it all up, the bearing well, and of course if I flip it upside down, all that oil is going to come out. So what I'm going to do is clean that out again. I got lots of oil, so I'm not worried about it. And then what I'll do is cap it off with some masking tape or something. Usually I put a plug of blue tack in there and then masking tape over top, and that prevents any residual oil from dripping out if I don't scoop it all up when I'm cleaning it up. So there, let's get to it. Okay, now I've got the arm out. It's just 2 set screws in the base of this here, which allows you to adjust the VTA if you're so inclined to do such things. So we're not going to monkey with this thing, which is the anti-skate. We don't want to get that off of skew here. I don't think there's any way you can actually. But so here's your gimbaled bearings here, and you've got 2 bearings on each, 2 bearing points on each side here on the horizontal axis, and then you've got on the vertical axis, you've got this bearing basically holding it in place between the 2 there, so that it's pivoting on those 2, but allows to go up and down, and allows actually a horizontal movement. And then the 2 horizontally placed bearings allow for a vertical up and down of the Tonearm assembly. Okay, so so these ones are easy. They just use little small flathead screws in order to set in place the bearing points that you see right here on the replacement arm. You can see these really fine pointed conical bearing points there, and this little rail actually goes on the top and sets in place, provides a stopper for in the vertical direction, which you can see right there. That little rail across there acts as a stopper. And there's this little teeny wire with a little brass fitting with a fitting on the end of it that actually goes into this position here. So we'll have to figure that one out. It actually goes in on the side there. So there's a little groove, if you see right in here, and that's where that little brass fitting slides in with a very hairline thin sort of fishing wire attaching to the inside of this tube here. So so yeah, we'll do this, and then the for this bearing, it's got an odd on my other one, it actually has a flathead screw similar to these in order to undo it, but for whatever reason they went to this 2-pin thing. And I've got a watch making dealio here, a tool with different tips that I think will make a good little sort of driver to open that up. I'll just have to find it here. I think it's in my cupboard here, so I'll be back. Hopefully you enjoy this tool I was talking about. It's a watchmaker's tool. It's a case opener for waterproof watches, and there's these little nipples here on the end, and there's replaceable nipples depending on the size of your notches in the back of your watches,
and then you just adjust this to adjust the distance apart. So we'll adjust that, and hopefully it will go close enough that it will work on this thing. Fingers are crossed. It's gonna be close. Oh, and it's too large, but we may be able to make it work. Oh, maybe not. Well, that's a bummer. They made this wheel here too thick, so it can only get so close. It's made for watches, not really for this kind of a dealio. But I also have another tool that I think I can use. It's a circlip thing that I can, with bent fingers, that I can use to adjust that as well. So let me come back and see if that one works. So as luck would have it, I think that circlip tool that I have is out on my boat, where I have a big tool kit for working on my boat to keep it at sea. Anyway, so I found two other solutions that work just as effectively. I have a nice curved set of needle nose pliers, which you can see right here. And basically, all you do is hold the needle nose pliers, and the tips on these are fine enough that actually can get into those two holes that you can see on that bearing nut or bearing screw or whatever. And then you can just turn it that way. And then once you get it loose, then you can just finger undo it. The other tool I found that's just as effective is this protractor, or compass, or whatever you call it. Protractor, I think they're called. And then you can turn it out this way. This one's kind of a flimsy one, but I like this tool better. But you can get one of these things for chart keeping or geometry kind of thing in a geometry kit. And that will allow you to adjust it. You just want to be careful you don't scratch it with the tips. That's why I like this one better. It's a duller thing, and you're not going to accidentally scratch the, even though there's a cap on it, so it doesn't really matter. Even if you do scratch it, nobody will see it. So you just sort of unscrew it that way. And first we'll do the bearing points, and well, let's do this one first. Let's take this one off. I can see it's starting to flop already. I think we may be okay. Might even only need to do the other two bearing points. It's starting to get a lot of play there. Yeah, a lot of up and down play. May not need to undo that one totally. Let's do these ones first. Take these out. And then what I'll do is I'll clean them with isopropyl alcohol, get the old grease off, and put some good lubricating oil on those. Just don't want to do anything roughly because you don't want to damage the bearings in these things. So I'm just totally removing them. I got a little magnet thing there to prevent it from getting lost. That's one part out. In fact, once the one is out, you can take the whole thing out. And it's just basically getting these wires up, I think. Because it looks like it will come out. Now those wires are creating quite a bit of resistance, but and the other part of it too is you want to make sure that this, before you start tugging on it, these are nice grips here, and we'll remove, let's see, I have to probably go back and watch my video on how I did the other one. just to make sure I don't damage this. Because there is a fine little wire that goes through a little channel guide here. But the brass thing, I think, is inside there. Yeah, let me get back to you. I gotta just look this thing up again before I start wrecking things. Be right back. All right, I had a good watch of the old video, and what I did on the previous arm, it was a couple of years ago, so I don't have a good memory of it. But you have this little collar here that's removable. You just unscrew this little screw on the bottom here, and then this whole arm tube will come through this, and this little wire actually hooks up to the anti-skating. It's kind of a lever arm for adjusting your not anti-skating, sorry, but your tracking force dial. It's up here. That's what it hooks into. And without having to take that all apart, if I wanted to, you know, I could do this as an assembly, but why would I do that when this tracking force assembly is all assembled? I can just take this off, and then I can use this collar with this old arm. So I'll take that one off and have a spare. And so if that little wire ever snapped, I have another one. And we'll use the one that's in place, which is working just fine. They're identical. So what I'll do is I'll unscrew this, and I can slide the arm out. I'm going to unscrew the one that's on here. You can see the screw right there. And then I can slide that collar off, and I'll use this collar on this arm. And that way I don't have to reassemble the whole anti-skating mechanism here, and I don't have to take this bearing out any further. And have everything sort of go kablooey on me. So that is a good compromise. So what we'll do is we'll pick it up from there, and I'm going to link both the procedure for balancing the arm, but as you can see with the arm too, look at how bent that bullet receiver is, that bayonet mount is for this arm, if you can see it on that angle. It's bent quite a bit down, so it's a good thing that we're taking this thing out of action and putting a new one that's nice and straight, as you can see there. So you can see the difference in curvature. So this will be a good thing. Okay, so back to time lapse. Okay, there I removed it, and when you're removing the collar is sitting on here. You don't want to push it through, otherwise you could hyperextend that tracking force dial wire, which is very, 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 very fine. In this case, what you do is you push that collar forward here, and then you slide the tube out through the assembly this way, instead of trying to push this, you know, it around the curve, because you could actually end up breaking that assembly. So. There's the old one to be put away for posterity. I don't know if there's any other usable parts on there. I might try on a vise, is to bend it back to true, and that way I'll have a nice backup arm. I'll do it very carefully so I don't snap anything, and then I'll use a spirit level basically to make sure it is true, and then I can use that as a spare arm. And I do have another spare arm that has just a little ding there, and it's perfectly straight. I just didn't want to have the ding showing on my nice main system turntable. So there we go. That was easy enough. So I'll show you what I meant on the last one. So I use a fine tooth or fine flathead screwdriver. And you just unscrew this. It's a long, sort of pointy, kind of looks like a wood screw that comes out of the bottom. You can see that. Hopefully I'm doing it on camera. I can't always see what I'm filming and watch what I'm doing at the same time here. So you remove that, and you can see the little screw that comes out of there. Like I say, it's like a little wood screw, but it's into the tube of the back tube here. Now, when you're inside the bearing, the gimbal bearing portion, you don't want to bring this piece out this way, as I mentioned. You want to actually slide this you can see the little wire there. You want to actually slide this through this way and then bring the whole arm out through this way. And that way you won't hyperextend this very, very fine wire or fishing line kind of attachment that goes into this tube and attaches to your tracking force dial. So, and as you can see, it's already in place there, and see how the little wire is just kind of hanging on, and then there's a little slot it goes through. So when we put this back, we're going to go back in the same way. This looks like it has a little bit of lubrication on it. So we're going to clean that up. Use a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on it just to get rid of some of that grease. Now this does not, it's not a sliding mechanism on this part, other than having the dial, or the weight, the counterweight, which slides up and down. So a little bit of lube on there is a good idea, but this part, that was the only part that was lubed, and it actually is a fixed part. So you just want to make sure you got a little bit of, oil on here, not much, and that way you can get a nice slide for the your counterweight. So we're gonna clean this off, and then we'll re-lube it when I get to putting the counterweight back on. So that's getting rid of all the old sticky grease that's on it. So I just hit it with isopropyl alcohol, a nice clean rag. It doesn't leave any kind of lint or anything behind. And you see where the wires come out and where the grounding strap is to the actual Tonearm itself, Tonearm tube. These are going to the head shell. Those go on the bottom. So you're going to slide this through this mechanism here, with this device on there, and we're going to not ding up these bearings, wreck the points on them. You're going to just do this very carefully. Give you an idea to get these all leaning forward. So these have got to go through that down tube eventually. So there. And these, can you see there? So I'm getting all the wires bundled together to go through here. Be very careful not to tug on any of the wires, because these are very delicate wires. And make sure they all come through. You kind of want to have them all together, so you don't want to have them all willy-nilly, because these can actually affect your anti-skating by tugging, so you want to have them sort of loosely through there. And then we're going to slowly advance this through, get everything through, including the bearings, and then this goes back on. I'm not going to do anything up until I can get those wires through the tube. You can see how this thing has to line up. Now I can see why they had a little bit of grease on there to get this to slide through. So we will do that. There, I forgot to push play on the camera, but what I did was I put a little bit of jeweler's oil on there, just to make sure that it's a little bit lubricated, so I can slide it up and over. I'm going to get all these wires together because they're bunching up around here. Okay. There, it goes on nicely. We don't want to tug on it because we don't want to snap that lead wire that goes to the tracking force thing. Okay, there, it's all lined up. And we're going to use our little screw here that we took off that I showed you. And our little screwdriver. Get that in place. I'm not going to drive it completely home, I might need to take that off if I'm having problems feeding these wires down that tube. That's going to be an interesting one, is getting them all down that tube, because with more wires, even though they're thinner, it might bung up going down this tube here. They've got to come out here. So you got to feed them all the way down. So how to do that? First of all, we need better light. It's going to be bright in the camera, but I need to be able to see. Oh, there we go. And then I'm going to probably, I was kind of thinking, should I feed them all together as one? Or should I feed them individually through? All right, folks, what I did was I got a longer piece of shrink tubing because this was too short and it was just kept pulling out. And I went a greater length so it has more biting power on the thing and on the wires. So what we're going to do is feed it through. You don't want to take all of the pressure there. I did a little drop of crazy glue at the end, just where there was no other wires, just so it would sort of pull a bit better, I guess. So I don't know if that, but I want to feed it kind of through as well as pull, so that way I don't actually leave the shrink tubing in the tube. It may not work. Seems to be coming. And there it goes. Wow. Maybe the shrink tubing is a little too long. Oh, no, I got it right. Just right, just enough. So now what I want to do is pull the shrink tubing apart without damaging the wires, and that's going to be the tricky part. So what I'm going to do is start it with a little razor knife here on the end where there's no wire. It's just the there. And hopefully we don't damage the, that's the tricky part. Oh, there we go. Once you get it started, then it just peels right out. And there we go. And I'm already sensing that the lead wires on this Tonearm are not long enough. So we may have to do some, use the old lead Tonearm wires, which are much longer, as you can see. That's pretty chintzy of them. Pretty sure the other one I didn't have to do that. So these lead wires are way too short. So that's not ideal. But we got them through. So I can always reuse some of the length of this, and I'll have to solder them end to end and put some shrink tubing. Well, we'll see. I don't want to make them way too much either. So that's in there perfectly. So now what I can do is I can screw this down properly. And I'm not happy about that. That's how it came from the Thorens factory in Switzerland. they bought all the new old stock when the factory closed, and this was one of those items. So now what we've got to do is make sure that the other bearing, so I didn't touch the other bearing, I just touched this side. And so we got to make sure this bearing is in its place without damaging the cone. And once again, I had the video. I paused the video and then forgot to start it. But anyway, I've got the bearings in, and not a lot of play in them, but they still need to be adjusted. But I'm not going to adjust them, further fine-tune them until they're actually on the arm and mounted and everything. Yeah, very little play. I think I've got it pretty close, but I still need to cinch down one of these to make sure it works properly. Yeah, no play, but it's very fluid. And I've got this one cinched down too. So I figured out why these lead wires are short. On the later runs, and I went back and looked at the video where I did my TD-160, which is a newer version. Here you can see the serial number of this arm, 005862. I don't know if you can read that. There you go. What it is on the newer TD-160s, the later runs of the Mark I, they had the junction block for the RCA to the Tonearm lead wires was actually right below the where the Tonearm mounts, the Tonearm mounting board, and so the lead wires didn't need to be as long on the newer run. So this Tonearm is actually from the newer run of turntables. It's exactly the same, it's just it didn't have the longer lead wires, because on here the mounting block is on the back. So this is the back of the turntable, is somewhere over here. So you have to get the wires all the way over to that mounting block where the block connects to the RCA jacks. So there's one of two things I could do. I could either move the mounting block closer so I don't have to have a break in the line, or what I'm going to do, or what I could do is, but then of course there's hardware for mounting that mounting block, and that could get a little bit dicey. Or what I can do is I can take a couple of these lead wires, and or all of these lead wires, and take enough length to get me over there, and then just extend them, and try not to get any breaks in the line or whatever. Either one, it's not ideal, but it is what it is. That's unfortunately the arm that they sent me, and I don't want to tear this all apart and rewire, because there is a potential that you could actually screw up this connection here. There's a pin that comes out here. You can pull it out and you can rewire it that way. Some people do it to do Litz wires or whatever. But it has a certain amount of risk. You can actually brick the Tonearm by improperly taking it apart and breaking that connector that's in there. And it has to be perfectly aligned. Otherwise, the head shell won't properly mate up to it. So I think going with the extended wire option is going to be my only real choice here. But I'll have a look at the block in there and see if it is movable. And we'll see what we can do. So we're going to feed these wires down through. And then bring it up, and I've had a measurement. Actually, I used one of these tools, and it was the perfect measurement for the distance above. So we plunk that down. Ooh, and alas, the set screw is almost out. So we don't want to lose that set screw. So we're going to hold it right there, and then that will be the same exact VTA that was on it previously. Now this actually, got to go look at my other turntable and see the orientation. So you also have to make sure this is oriented correctly, and I think it comes off at an angle about that. Be right back. I'm going to double check because it actually goes forward a bit. It's almost at a 45-degree angle to the block assembly. So using the Mark 1 eyeball initially, but this can be always adjusted later if there's a problem. It's not rocket science. And making sure my height is correct. You don't want to tighten these so much that you strip them, but they need to be nice and snug. So if you strip these, then you got to go and find some set screws somewhere, which would be a bugger. And there we go. You can see there is a little bit of play, so we still have to adjust those bearings a little bit. But we'll do that once the... we can do that now, I guess. I think... which is the one? Yeah, that was the one. So the set bolt, you want to make sure you're spinning it, but not spinning this, because otherwise you'll lose the bearing out of there again. And what you didn't see was I put a little drop of oil, jeweler's oil, inside of each of those bearing receptacles, just so I make sure it's well lubricated. That seems to be good. Now we'll do the procedures for tuning the bearing here pretty soon. Okay, so I got it the way I like it. Pretty sure that noise is actually inside there. That's not in the bearing. Bearing is solid, nice and fluid. There we go. Oh, I'm doing it the wrong angle. Once again, I'm more focused on doing the work than I am showing you people. So what I ended up doing was I cinched down this top bearing screw, and not too much, but just enough so that it's no longer any play in the bearing. And so we've got really good light left-right motion, very fluid, and up-down is good. And then I just hold the thing and notice there's no shake or rattle or anything. Only when it's in here I can make a rattle, but that's just rattling here. So there we go. I think the bearing is really good.
But again, we'll just do the confirmation checks on my little checklist here, which is this procedure here: Tonearm bearing adjustment on Thorens TP-16 arms, and showing you basically how to adjust the play in the arm. There we go. So now we can start focusing on what we're going to do on the underside and getting the wires connected up. So there you see the dilemma, where I have short leads, and on my other Thorens turntable, the connection block assembly for connecting the RCA wires that comes up through this line, goes into this block on this side, on the outside here, and the lead wires on the old arm came all the way over here and connected up on this block assembly. Well, in the newer Mark 1 turntables, the later run, I guess, of them, that block assembly was actually right here underneath the Tonearm pivot point. So you didn't need a long lead in order to run the wires. And that's probably what they found was these wires actually act as a sort of a spring to anti-skating. So the longer you have a lead of wire, there's more weight to it. It applies some forces to the Tonearm, and it can screw your weighting, skew your weighting of the arm and the anti-skate balance and everything. But not such a big deal. What we can do is I'm going to end up using probably these are the only lead wires I have right now, or these ones. So I'll figure out a distance, which is about that much. A little bit for, you want to have some, you don't want to have it just a straight run. You want to actually have it come across to the wall here. I'm going to put an anchor point here, and then we'll connect it up, and I will have a connection point, but I can use very, 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 very small amount of shrink tubing, I guess, to mate the wires, and see if we can make that work. Ideally, I would run wires, but you know, it's just too much of a risk on these old arms to run new lead wires all the way through the arm and take everything apart, and then of course you can bung things up. So this, I think, is the second best solution. You can see still some of the powder that's on the springs, as I showed you quite a while ago now on how to clean the springs and everything, so they're holding up good. They need to be adjusted, as I mentioned before, but let's see what we can do. Now, trying to get a good camera angle for this is going to be difficult because my tripod is not that great, so I'll probably have to explain it as I go here. So, more to follow.
Alright, that wasn't so terribly hard. It's very finicky and fussy work, but so we got the extension wires hooked on, and I just used a little bit of very small shrink wrap just on the hot cables. Ground I just left open, but they don't touch the hot. That's why I used the shrink wrap. And then we have the ground lead that goes to the right leg there, so we will check continuity before I slap it all together again. And what I did was I taped it here as a temporary fix because, as you know, I mentioned I'm going to change out this plinth to a better plinth. So this is going on to a different turntable. So once I get to the other plinth, I'll put a better fastener there than just a piece of electrical tape. But that'll only be there for maybe a week or so. So we should have the Tonearm wired now, and we're gonna flip her upside down, and we're gonna start looking at the spring. So what I'm gonna do is put it back upside down on these cans here. I put the cloth on it just so it doesn't scratch the nice finish on the top plate. And what we'll do, use an 8mm bolt driver basically to adjust these springs to get the suspension. We'll do that after I get I do the bearing adjustments, and we'll hopefully get this thing springing really nice for the weight and everything, so it's not hitting or coming close to the protection post that I put in. And yeah, so now we have I'm pretty sure. So the other thing is we put this as a strain relief, so this doesn't have any tension on the Tonearm. And I spread the wires out so that it evens out any kind of tension that is on the Tonearm. So yeah, that should work good. I don't think we'll have to do a grounding mod. There is a grounding mod that allows you to electrically fasten this suspension plate to the other. Most turntables don't need it, but if there is some hum or anything like that, we can always do that. You know, with these bolts here, we can run a grounding strop or something like that. But I don't think we'll need that. So there we go. And there you can see that I've got it flipped upside down, still on the cans. That way I'll be able to access the suspension bolts as I trim that at that point. What we're going to do is put the platter on. We'll put the lube back in into the main bearing, the platter bearing, and we'll get everything balanced out with the belt on, and we'll also play with the bearings. I think I nailed it. I mean, I think that is so smooth, and there's no play. I think I nailed it. And we'll put the Q-arm lever back on, test that, make sure it's lowering properly. And we're getting close. We're getting so close. So hopefully we'll have a playing turntable here pretty quick. Alright, I just did a rough test on the bearing, and so I put fluid in as I did before, and without the belt on, I spun it up. Now this is not a scientific method, as everybody will point out, because I don't know the RPM that I started with, but I could have just put it on 45 and then timed it, but I just spun it up as, you know, as good as I could with the finger, and let it run until it stopped, and it was just over 5.5 minutes. So I could probably eke out a little bit more. I think I could put a little more bearing oil into the bearing well, but
I think that's adequate, and very happy with how that turned out. So next, what we're going to do is focus a little more on the Tonearm here, and get the bearing just right. I think I'm there, but I just want to make sure it's in accordance with the procedure. We'll follow. Right, so I decided before carrying on, I would try to level this up, and I noticed that the table is fairly level. There's a little bit of an angle to it, not much, but I think that's because I've got a dissimilar size can here. I only had two of the same kind of cans and whatnot. So I'm going to try to even this up as best I can. So I need to go this way. That's exactly what I need. So that's the odd size can right there. That's the odd size can. That's higher, so that's why it's a little low on that side. So what I'm going to do is try to find some sort of spacer to differentiate this side here. So I'm going to use a popsicle stick. There. And that makes it just about bang on. Maybe a little bit more on this side. Yeah, that's it. Popsicle stick and a bullet bang on level on my platter. If you can see the table actually. Hang on. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to level this. So the table's level and the spirit level, now my bubble is actually off center by that. So these spirit levels here are great because it gives you an idea of fore and aft and in 2D basically whether your surface is level or not. And clearly the turntable platter is not. And the way you can do a spirit level, or what I use is a nice little ruler. This was actually from my unexploded explosive ordnance program, but these are handy little rulers, and I want to get my same millimeters of distance from the deck of the even and flat surface of the turntable to the edge of the platter. So right here I'm reading about 8 millimeters, and over here it's 5 millimeters, and here it's really low at 4.5 to 4 millimeters. So when I spin it, you can actually hear, well, I've got the belt on, so it's not spinning as easily, but it actually is very close to that protection rod. So what I need to do is I need to elevate this side of the table and get it all level, and probably lower this side. It's a little too high. And then I want to get the bounce that we'll show you. And you can tell that it's incorrect. It's actually sort of sloped this way just because of the Tonearm thing here should be near flush. It does not always end up being flush. It depends on your springs. But it's quite clearly sort of loaded this way. So this side is higher than this side, is what I'm trying to get at. So what I use is an 8 millimeter nut driver. I just pulled that out of a wrench set. So it's European, so it's all metric here. not inches and 1/8 inches and all that stuff, but 8 millimeters. And there's 3 springs that we did the cleaning of. Now we're going to adjust the nut on the end of those springs to tighten or loosen to get this platter completely dead even with the plinth level and the floor level, just to make sure it's nice and parallel to the floor or the top part of the plinth. So we're going to put the driver in, and I know this side is high, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start driving this, turning this so it drops it, and you can actually see it dropping. So you got a tripod here because you got 3 springs, and it's fairly easy to level out, and pretty sure it's 3, 6 or 7. Go to, let's go to 6. So we got 6 there. I'm going to have to get my face into here just to, that's a little high on this side, so we're going to adjust this spring. Just 6. And this side is going to have to come up for sure. And we want to come up. And there's 6. And of course, if I raise that in, this side will dip, so you got to sort of do it back and forth until you get it the way you like it. And then once you can put the spirit level on. Oh, and it's very close. Well, once again, I caught myself talking to myself. I did this whole sequence of setting up the springs. Went about it and was explaining the whole thing, and I realized I didn't push record. So here's sort of in a nutshell what I'm doing. So what I did was I used a spirit level basically to make sure that the plinth top is completely flat all the way around. This is a metal sheet, and if it's not put on properly, it could have waves. This one is actually really good. So if I measure with I use one of these types of spirit levels, so it's not just side to side whether it's level, it's also up in sort of in all axes, X and Y axes, in 2 dimensions. And you want to make sure that the bubble is in the bullseye all the way around, and it is for the base. So the base here is parallel with the floor when the bubble is in the center of the bullet there, and I've got it to that point. You can't really see it. Maybe I can take the camera off and show. And then when I did that, because I hadn't adjusted, I just cleaned the springs, put the springs on, but I didn't adjust them. This was way out of whack. The platter should be parallel with the top of the plinth, the top plate of the plinth, and also parallel with the floor. And it wasn't. It was actually elevated in one side. So this side was elevated, and this side was lower. And when I was spinning it, it was actually rubbing against the top of that protection post. Another good reason to have that protection post by the motor. So if you don't have one, you can either easily make one out of parts you can get at a hardware shop, or you can 3D print like I did, or there's many options of making one to the right dimensions. So there's 3 springs, so it's essentially a tripod here. It's a suspension turntable. So this platter assembly and the arm are all connected together, and they're suspended by 3 springs. There's a spring basically here, here, and over here. So if that's uneven, you adjust the springs. So there's 3 nuts on the end of the spring posts at the very bottom, And what I use is an 8mm nut. These are metric turntables. Obviously they're made in Europe, so they're metric, not you don't use imperial type of wrenches or anything. So it's an 8mm nut that are on these, and you go around and you adjust them. And what I do is I use both the spirit level and I use a ruler. And I cut this ruler off so there's 0 right at the very bottom. And I was shooting for about 6mm all the way around. And that's kind of half the battle. You get it to that point where, you know, it's all 6mm around, because it's a tripod. It's very easy to do. But you may find that it's a little bit out of whack, so you use your spirit level, also focusing on, is my platter mat flat or is it rippled? I don't know how much of that I got. The camera keeps shutting off on me. Maybe somebody's phoning me or something and keeps kicking me out or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to go back and see how I got this. But I got the suspension to where I want it. So you're going about a label distance in, and you're going to adjust it as a system, so up and down until you get to the proper balance. And that's exactly what you're looking for right there. See how it just up and down is not jiggling or anything? 8mm bolt to adjust them from the inside. I normally go to, so we're really at about, let's say 5.5mm for this turntable. It depends on how good your springs are. And then just go back and do a quick little check of your bubbles. Make sure everything's, as I was adjusting them even, and yeah, everything's nice and flush with the top of the top plate, with the top of the table, with the floor, just because that bubble is dead on. Okay, so now we've got the suspension all tuned. We might have missed a lot of that because for some reason my phone keeps turning off. May have to come back and revisit that. I'm going to go and watch these and upload it to my computer, because I think what's happening is I'm running out of memory or something. Okay, filmed moments after I did the preamble video to this whole part 6 series. So yeah, I ran out of time. I had to do a lot of discussions and pointing out some things. So the actual procedure of calibrating and setting up the bearings on this will have to wait till a further part 6 that'll be coming out shortly. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got something out of it. Thank you.